But the vegan thing was, I mean, that saved me. Honestly, the being vegan and knowing my purpose, my mission in my life, the reason I'm on earth, I believe wholeheartedly that saved my life. Because I knew I had to keep going. I knew I had to be the best self I could be. And I knew that I was never going to give up in that mission.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch4Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch4Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch4Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch4Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
Our guest today has known what her calling is at a much younger age than most of us, if we found ours at all. A fitness enthusiast, environmentalist, and outspoken animal rights activist before the age of 15, Ella Majors is a fitness coach and author and founder of Sexy Fit Vegan. She's been on a personal quest to help people change their attitudes toward food and wellness, and she has an international following to prove it. Ella was named one of the top 50 trainers in America by Shape Magazine and Trainer of the Month by Bodybuilding.com. Armed with a master's degree in social work, certifications with the National Academy of Sports Medicine, extensive training in Muay Thai, and an inherent ebullience, Ella epitomizes what's possible on a plant-forward diet. Cue the rewind. That intro I just read is what the internet shares with us about Ella. And certainly most of it is true, if not all. But today we're going to go deep into Ella's current life journey, a journey that is taking her on an unexpected, challenging quest to find her very truest calling. A journey that many of us have been on our way to embarking on who we really are. And possibly that's the case for most of you, given that it's the new year. Ella has overcome many of her own personal challenges along the way. It hasn't been an easy road, y'all. And we know she's also going to get to the other side of this challenge. We're incredibly honored Ella is willing to share the current ride she is on with us and our listeners so that she can guide, share, inspire, and maybe even jumpstart your quest to become who you were meant to be. So, Ella, thank you and welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here, Dotsie and Alexandra.
And when I was on your podcast a few months ago, you shared your deep desire for a bit of a career shift, a career change, one that just aligns more firmly with your values today and your desire to make, big, widespread change in this world. And I got to admit, this was just a conversation that we had after the podcast was over. And I felt so moved by your being so self-effacing, so honest, so real. And because we don't know each other that well. And I just felt so moved that I wanted to see if you'd be willing to kind of share that with a much larger audience and kind of dive into your process and this journey that you're on with our audience. And so you said yes. So here we are. And I think that we should just kind of come in hot, right? I think we should go from the bottom to top. And of course, we'll traverse everything in between. But we know what you've accomplished, a little bit of it. You've accomplished even way more. But in the intro, we got a little bit of a flavor of what you've accomplished. But the journey to those accolades that I spoke of was not an easy one. You faced multiple challenges. You've suffered from like clinical depression, anxiety, disordered eating, body dysmorphia, severe insomnia, just to name a few. Some of which, or maybe even all, our audience can certainly relate to. So I want to start with what pain you were running from during those tumultuous times. And I know they were sprinkled about, it wasn't, all in one. But if you could share, if you've dug in to figure out what that pain was you were running from, and what was it like to be in Ella's skin during the hardest times?
Ooh, that's a big question and a complicated one. Yeah. So, there's, and this is something that I'm still very much exploring every day, And where I am right now is really experiencing life as this adventure, this puzzle, and the awareness piece is what is so strong right now. So I get to explore and weed through the mess, and where I'm at is this extreme willingness and even desire to share and to be curious and compassionate, which has not always been the case in terms of compassion to myself. So I've always been really hard on myself. Talk about perfectionism. I am for sure a recovering perfectionist. This year has been probably the most insane. I don't even know how to describe it. And it started at the beginning of 2022. So about a year ago when this will come out. And I decided that I was in a place where I was ready to get off antidepressants. Because I had been on a spiritual journey for quite some time. And I felt ready. I felt ready to navigate. And something that I've always worked with clients on is, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, is being able to sit in our discomfort and not needing to constantly run from it and hide and distract ourselves and numb ourselves. And I felt like I had the tools to get off antidepressants, which I've been on pretty consistently since I was 16 years old. And I'm 42 now. And so got off the antidepressants, and about a month later, I felt myself.
Can I just ask, when you got off, did you wean yourself off with the help of a doctor? I just want to make sure that anyone who's really inspired by you doesn't go, okay, let's toss those in the.
This is probably one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of things, because I did the Google doctor thing and did it myself. I did kind of wean off. Well, what had happened was I had made a friend who, it was an old friend who, once you start, I don't know how much of your audience is interested in like quantum physics and spirituality on that level and that consciousness. Well, I got really into that. And when you get really into that, you start meeting people that are really into that. And friends that I had for quite a long time, it was like I started connecting with a few of these friends very deeply because I started to really explore quantum physics and mechanics and consciousness in this new way. And so one of my friends told me the story of how he really healed himself through the use of DMT. So I started really exploring the psychedelic route, and he said, I can help you have a DMT experience.
And DMT is psychedelic, yes. But what is it?
Yes, it's a substance that's made from the bark of a tree, and they have different kinds of substances, but you smoke it, and within a few seconds, you are kind of taken to another dimension. You are out of your body, out of your mind. You really are disconnected with your identity. It's very powerful, very strong stuff.
Can you see yourself? Is it kind of like you're outside of yourself?
No, it's like you're not yourself anymore.
Whew. Okay.
It's literally you lose sight, you lose the sound, you're hearing the energy. Actually, DMT is part of ayahuasca. So the visual effects of ayahuasca are coming from DMT. And so he said the only stipulation is that you really shouldn't be on antidepressants. And I was gung ho. I wanted to do this so badly. And I was like, I think this is part of the answer. And so I weaned myself off very quickly, much quicker than I probably should have, so that I could have this experience as quickly as possible, which I did. And I did it under his guidance, and he had been doing it for years. He actually made it himself. He does the whole process. But however, I did it at his apartment, and I scooted home. I'm a Miami scooter girl, so I got a scooter. So that very night after doing this experience, which I went in 3 times, the trip only lasts 10 to 15 minutes each. I went back in 3 times, and it's this wild experience of you start smoking, and I had done the breathing exercises because you want to keep going as long as you can until you literally can't. And it was like at one point, I didn't know how to breathe anymore. That's right before I went in, is what I'll just say, into this void. But not void, because there's all sorts of energy in visuals, and then the energy that you hear. So it's like the visuals and I'm hearing, and it kind of confirmed what I already felt like I knew about the universe, that everything is made up of energy, and that what we see here is quite the construct of our minds. And it really just confirmed all those things. So it was very powerful, but I came out of it and went back into my everyday life. And honestly, nothing really changed. And when the antidepressants got fully out of my system, I found myself spiraling back into a depression, which I hadn't experienced in years, because I had consistently stayed on antidepressants. Because every time I tried to get off, then I fell back into a depression. And I said, well, it's just not worth it. And it was something I was embarrassed about for many years. It was something that, from my whole life, I've been vegan since I was 15. I've been vegetarian since I was 7. That was back in 1987 when I went vegetarian, 1995 when I went vegan. And, people were so quick, especially back then, to blame everything on, you're vegan. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your lifestyle. Your diet makes you depressed, right? So, and that had a lot to do with my body image issues and not wanting to tell anybody about anything except happiness and perfection, because I wanted everybody to be vegan. So that was a large part of my life. Got into this depressed mode, and then the burnout. It was like with the depression came this extreme sense of total burnout, which I hadn't really experienced before. I thought that because I was doing what I was passionate about, because I was an entrepreneur and I got to create my own schedule. And yes, I was I was never taking vacations, but I burn out. I completely, utterly burn out, to the point I saw a computer screen and my eyes would just glaze totally over. I had just partnered with an amazing new partner who does marketing and PR, and I had just partnered with her, and we were in creation mode. And I had to tell her, I was like, I can't create. I have nothing. And at that point, my back, I had a bulging disc. It stopped allowing me to do my natural antidepressants of all my calisthenics and all the fitness exercises and yoga that I love to do. It was like everything was stripped from me. And it was like I couldn't hardly move through the world at that point.
Can we go to the source of that original pain, or wherever you started recognizing that you were spiraling and that you were having all these emotional and physical challenges that we kind of spoke of the disordered eating and the dysmorphia, insomnia? Like, is there a source of pain that you've connected that to back, and if not, that's fine, because it's not always a connection. It just is, right? It just is in your life. Pain.
Right. Well, and this will come up again when I talk about the ayahuasca journey, but this is something I've explored quite a bit, and I've gone from, having my master's degree in social work, and I really specialized in the strengths perspective in my education. So it was much less about looking at the past and more about looking at your strengths and how you can move forward, right? And that kind of goes with the whole positive thinking movement. Well, the last few years have really more been about, for me, yes, accepting what is and moving forward, but also learning about trauma. And learning from experts like Gabor Mate and understanding how we heal traumas from our own childhood, as well as from ancestral, traumas. There's so many traumas that we can connect to. And the one that I had been able to connect to, there were a few. Number one, I remember from my animal rights days, and by that I mean direct activism. And that was my teenage years when I was 15 to 18, really out there, leafleting, pamphleting, sitting in cages, doing all the direct action, really thinking in my mind that, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew it. And when I found out, I immediately stopped eating animals. I immediately was vegan for life. And I thought, well, people just don't know. And so here I am, I just want to share. I just want everybody to know so they can make a decision like I did. And when I realized very quickly that the majority of people, especially back 1995 era, most people didn't want to know. And even when they did, they weren't ready to consciously connect with that information in a way that would promote change in their lives. And that was very disheartening. I was so connected with animals. My heart and my spirit it was as if I knew when I was 7 years old that I'm on this earth to help alleviate the suffering of animals through helping people go vegan. And so that was a heartache that was really intense for me. Also to be surrounded by almost nobody who even knew what the word vegan meant. And that was very lonely at times. And it was very disheartening for me. And I also felt like a failure. And I don't think I realized that until later. But as a teenager, I'm out there just putting my heart into educating and spreading awareness. And when people were not ready to hear it, and when the suffering continued to that degree, and it hurt. It hurt, and I took it very personally, I believe. So there was that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is that why you moved into another realm? Instead of dealing with the suffering of animals, you focused on the health of humans, which, yeah, I understand that exactly. Very, very much. We have to preserve ourselves. And if we're feeling broken and devastated inside, lonely by the pain that we're seeing and keep talking about with animals, and we're coming up against a brick wall, I just want to give you kudos that you didn't just leave your whole philosophy behind. You stuck with it, but just changed tactics for self-preservation. So good for you.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think it was in part self-preservation, and in part it just wasn't working. That's how it presented to me, was that it wasn't effective. And I did it for many years and did not feel like it was my most effective tactic. And always been into fitness since I was 5, movement, exercise, sports, gymnastics, taekwondo, volleyball, has always been a passion of mine as well. So I thought, well, what a great way to help animals is by being the example and having people come up to me, which did start to happen after college. Now, getting back to trauma, so I feel like that was a source of trauma for me. Also, in my teenage years going into college, I had an abusive boyfriend. I had many very poor relationships and choices in men over the years. But my boyfriend at the time, I was 17 and then turning 18, getting into college, and he thought, well, I know, and he was older. He said, I think I know a great job for you. as you go to college. Because I was actually already thinking, I was like, you know what, I can't serve meat. And I know most college kids, like waitressing or serving is it's a great job. And I was like, but I can't do that. I can't. There's no way I can serve meat. So what am I going to do? And he said, well, let me take you somewhere. And he took me to a strip club. And he said, I think you'd be a great dancer. And I was a pretty rebellious kid. And I thought that looked kind of actually pretty glamorous. And I thought, well, what a better way to earn money, get myself through school and do it at night and
make more than waitressing, that's for sure.
Make more than waitressing. Yeah. But there's some glitz and glamour to that. Mm-hmm. And so I said, yeah, let me give it a shot. So that was my college job for 4 years. And
how, because I've been to strip clubs. I believe that women should be able to have the choice to do whatever job they want. And if it's dancing, to me, it's the people who have the less power are the men in there who want you but can't have you. And so dancers really have quite a lot of power. I don't find it not being a feminist to be a dancer. I support unionization of dancers and all that. But was that a traumatic thing for you to do? And how was it traumatic? How did it affect you and your body image and your eating disorder and your depression?
Yeah, I didn't have an eating disorder yet. Going into that, my relationship with food was fine. It was a very traumatic experience for me. It was something that, and it's not something I've talked about. I don't think I've talked about it on a podcast yet. And I was actually in the car earlier today saying, oh, I'm so ready to talk about this. I just am, because I'm ready to own it and to understand it and to talk about the effects it had on me, especially as an 18-year-old. A lot of kids at that age are going to college. They're exploring their sexuality in healthy, age-appropriate ways with other boys their age. And there's a lot of older men at these places. And what I did to, kind of protect myself was create a disconnect. Mm-hmm. Create a disconnect between me and my body.
Just to get the age, it's during college.
18 to 21.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah. And I created a disconnect with my body. And I've worked now in an adult lifetime so far of making that reconnection. And I believe this was a large source of where my eating disorders came from, where body dysmorphia came from. They kept anxiety pills in the back for me. I drove an hour and a half to go dance because I didn't want college kids in my school to come in and see. And that happened at the very first, because the first club I was at was right down the street from the college. And I said, well, that's no good. Let me drive an hour and a half down the road to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I met my relationships from then on. One who ended up in jail, one who is now dead, murdered. He was a cocaine dealer in Myrtle Beach, and he got stabbed 2 years ago to death. I mean, a lot of people get in and they get into the drug scene, and I spent the 4 years sober. I'm sure I would have had a lot more fun if I was drinking, but I was. Yeah, no, I really treated it as a job, and it was a miserable job for me. It was not. It's like, some women can go in there and do it and kind of have some fun with it and see themselves in the power. I don't think that's where I was. I wasn't able to do that. And I paid for it.
I can see how it would be hard, and especially in terms of seeing men at sometimes their worst there. How did it affect your sexuality, your personal sexuality, to be sexual in public in sort of a fake way, and then have to be real or want to be real in your real life with your boyfriend?
Yeah, I honestly didn't know how to be real. I didn't know how to be real. Mm-hmm. I knew how to perform, and I knew how to be very sexy, and I knew how to, pretend to have a good time.
It sounds like it overtook your whole person in a way. Like you didn't leave the strip club and then just become a student, and you had to disconnect and stay disconnected. Hence the start of the eating disorder and the body dysmorphia. Is it like you were, outside of yourself, looking at yourself and going, "Oh, we should tweak this. This should be thinner here," like a sculptor almost. This alter ego, or what was it like? What did it feel like inside of you when you started disordered eating?
Yeah, no, this was interesting because throughout college, and I went back and I got my degree in social work. I had a 3.87 GPA. I think it was a really good thing that I drove an hour and a half. It was literally like I had two lives to kind of play. But the vegan thing was, that saved me. Honestly, the being vegan and knowing my purpose, my mission in my life, the reason I'm on earth, I believe wholeheartedly that saved my life. Because I knew I had to keep going. I knew I had to be the best self I could be. And I knew that I was never going to give up in that mission. So the eating disorder actually came later when after college, and people started coming up to me, "How do you get your physique?" And I would say, and I started working at a gym. It was a whole engagement in there, and I moved to Miami, and then we broke up, and I had a fabulous, parts of my 20s were so fabulous. I was single. I was doing Muay Thai. I was running a gym, and behind closed doors, I was, binging at night and, having all sorts of issues that I was not willing to share, because people would come up to me and say, "How do you get your physique?" And I would be able to say, "Let me show you how to eat plant-based." Like that was my in.
You didn't know.
So then there was all this pressure. Yeah. Well, then there was all this pressure. And now what happens when my body doesn't look like that? And then nobody's going to come up to me. And then I've lost another how. This is my new how. And life has been that. It's been this journey of, okay, well, how? How do I get my message across? How do I help more people stop eating animals? And it was the leafleting and the direct action. And then it was the fitness, just leading by example. So everything was riding on my body being in such a shape year round that people would come up to me and ask me. And that's where that came from.
What are you eating? What are you doing? And yeah. Let's see
that. What I don't know if, as a lot of our audience knows, both Dotsie and I have struggled with eating disorders. And when I was in OA, Overeaters Anonymous, I was really shocked to see how many young women in there, as I would go to the meetings that were specifically for bulimics, which is what I was, they had experienced sexual trauma, sexual abuse. I had not. But I was really surprised, and apparently there's a really close tie. So do you feel that the dancing was the sexual trauma that you might have experienced? Or was it the, "Hey, you look so good," and that spiraled you downward into really needing to be, as you said before, you're a perfectionist, so you had to live up to that? What do you think were the reasons for the eating disorder and the body dysmorphia?
Yeah, I think it was a worthiness issue. And I think it was my worth is dependent on what my body looks like. And that took away, and that the pain around that, it really was, if I'm not, and it was all to do with my mission. So my worthiness is based on what I'm doing for animals, and my worthiness from what other people can see, and how I'm able to do that is dependent on my body. Now, none of that has to do with who I am as a person. It has everything to do with what I look like and what I'm doing. So there was no worthiness in just being. That's a lesson that I've been really working on this year. And by working on, trying not to work on while working on it at the same time.
Yeah, it's a double edged there.
Yeah.
You also had an exercise addiction. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was along the lines of that a horrible cycle of eating things that you feel guilty about eating, and then working it off. So I would just I got addicted to diet fuel, the ephedra, ephedrine back then. I would study on, I lived at the gym, would study on the bike, would study on the treadmill, would study on the Stairmaster, worked out incessantly. And yeah, so basically exercise bulimia would be the.
You have had such a extraordinary existence, even from your pain to all the things you have accomplished and back again a million times over. It traverses so much. And you shared with me a couple months ago and just a moment ago where you got to a point earlier this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe was the most frozen you've ever felt in terms of being able to, in terms of your output. You experienced a burnout so intense that you said you just had nothing. You literally had nothing to give this wonderful marketing person that was dying to collaborate with you and partner with you. And you said, I just have no creativity. I have nothing to give you. There's nothing to partner with. But there is certainly a lot there, Ella, but obviously you couldn't feel it or you couldn't access it or both. Take us through that from kind of, A to Z, or if you will. You may not be at Z yet, but A to C. Like what were the first feelings that you had that you realized that it was burnout, and that how terrifying it was.
It was literally like I was dissolving into nobody. It was like I was losing my identity. It was like I lost my spark, my joy, my energy. All of it just felt like it was dissolving into nothing. And I could have died. I could sit there. I could do nothing. I could do anything. There was just, I felt like I had nothing left in me. And which, looking back was such a blessing, because it said, I've got to do something different. Something has to change. And I want nothing to do with social media. I want nothing to do with the computer. I don't want email. I don't want any of that. And what I decided I wanted was a trip to Peru. I decided I wanted a trip to Peru, to the Amazon jungle.
And did this just pop into your head?
Well, I after the DMT experience, I had been researching psychedelics, and I was looking for alternative treatments for depression, knowing that I was getting off my antidepressants. And ayahuasca is something that's been in my wheelhouse, and I'm surrounded by so many more spiritual people in my life the last few years that I've been learning from, growing with, just the people I've surrounded myself with, so many of who have done ayahuasca trips. And I've always been that person who says, like mushrooms, yeah, that sounds good. But ayahuasca, I don't know about all the vomiting and the, people get so sick and they're just throwing up. And I don't see myself doing that. That's always was my attitude in the past. Well, at this point, that changed.
Was the burnout kind of a sister to the depression? Or was it, was that really what you ended up finding was underneath the burnout?
I believe it was. I believe I would have experienced that burnout sooner had I gotten off antidepressants sooner, because it had been a long time, been years since I had taken a break, a vacation. Like I really didn't know what a vacation was. And so I just kept going and going. And then the last, year or two, there were signs of burnout, and I would kind of switch directions with my group coaching program. I'd change it to a membership, and that all had to do with I was getting to that burnout place, but I would just make enough of a shift to kind of cover it up. So it had been coming. It had been coming.
So had the DMT, which you said were short highs that transported you somewhere else for maybe 15 minutes, and you did 3 of those, had that changed you? Like, how did it change you? Because when I turned 50, I'd never done drugs before. And I decided, well, the second half of my life, I'm not just going to keep doing like the first half just because that was my identity. So I did a mushroom trip and took E at Burning Man. And both of those they were fun, but frankly, I did not learn anything except the most valuable thing was that I went out of my comfort zone. That was the biggest learning experience, and that I had the courage to change my identity, which was one of, I've never taken drugs. But otherwise, I always ask people, like, what did you learn? Because I can feel good better, in fact, working out. Frankly, I feel really good. So what was the long lasting effect, if any, that DMT had on you that inspired you to want to take that step for ayahuasca?
Yeah, so I had done mushroom trips in the past as well, but never to the point of or never setting it up in quite the ceremonial spiritual way. And this is what I was saying about the DMT. I did this in private. It was just me and my friend who was guiding me. We did breathing exercises together. We really set the intention around growth and spiritual awakening. So I think there's something to be said about having psychedelic type experiences out and about in a public setting, like a Burning Man or a concert or whatever it is, which to me feels a little more recreational, or doing it with the proper guidance. And I don't think I had the proper guidance. I think it was fine with the DMT, but it wasn't what I needed. And that's why I was craving the Peru trip. I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this right. I want to do this with, shaman who have been doing this for years and whose parents had been doing this for years. I want to do this with the right facilitators. I want to learn about integration. I want to do the dieta beforehand to prepare my body and my mind. I want to do the integration process after. I want to follow all the guidelines, and I want to do it in the setting that is meant to be done, prepared by the people who I know who has prepared it and who have the experience to guide me through it in a transformational way. And that's why I decided to go the route of Peru. And then I had done a little research and really was into Gabor Mate, who talks about his experience at the Temple of the Way of Light. And he actually went down to be a facilitator at the Temple of the Way of Light, and they kicked him out of the ceremony and said, no, your dark energy is not working here. You need your own healing. And he talks about this experience on many podcasts. He's on their website, and he's amazing to me. And so I said, if he got what he needed out of that specific organization, which is a nonprofit organization, that's the one I want to go to. So I registered. Isn't he amazing?
He wrote In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it's one of my favorite books. It's the only book I think of his that I have read. I know you read his book on trauma, which really drew him to you. But anyway, I recommend his work to our listeners, and I hear so do you.
Definitely.
And share with those that don't know anything about him why you recommend the work, why the books are good, why, if that experience that he had was that for him, why then you wanted to, or why you then thought it was okay for you.
Yeah, his expertise around trauma is just so eye-opening, and all his books. His new book is The Myth of Normal. I have not read that one yet, but I have no doubt it's amazing. If you listen to him talk, there's just something, and I go on people's energy, and there's something about his energy, I think, beyond his words and what he's been through in his life that just spoke to me. And the fact that he could tell that story about going down to be a facilitator and getting kicked out, I thought that was pretty amusing. But it also told me that these shaman and the facilitators down there at this particular organization were the real deal too. So yeah.
Okay, so you're down
tell
there.
Us about your experience.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a 12-day retreat, and you do six ayahuasca ceremonies. I was very sick most of the time. Yeah, it was
exactly
rough.
What
you do
you were scared of.
Oh, girl, oh my gosh. The second night. So, but they have it all planned out, and you do a whole dieta beforehand. You can't have certain foods. I mean, a lot of it I already don't eat, but no sugar, oil, spicy foods. Basically, it has a lot to do with the spiritual energy of foods as well as detoxing your body. You do all this before you go down. You stick with that also when you come back for 2 weeks. Made it down.
Do they want people to take
myself.
Animals out? Because that's a whole nother energy that's floating around in people's bodies.
I know. And this is, I would love to go to a 100% vegan place. And it was not. They do have certain foods, chicken and fish, that they served. I agree with you on that one. That was a tough. They always had an alternative for the vegans, but they did have chicken and fish. But yeah, that's a tough one. 6 ceremonies. They have it all planned out. So the first ceremony is an introduction to the medicine. You learn all about the medicine, the spirituality of the plants, how it's created, how it's made. The first one's an introduction. You always go through a very ceremonial process to get yourself ready for it. The first night, I experienced almost nothing. I really, and I felt this terrible frustration, like, what the hell? I've come all the way down here and it doesn't work. Like, what is wrong with me?
Did you feel like a little high, or you just felt completely normal? I
felt a little nauseous. The first, a little nauseous, but nothing bad the first night. And there were no seconds the first night. Second night, you're allowed to get seconds. So second night comes, and and we're in what's called a maloka. There are beds. You have your little puke container, and the shaman come in. They actually utilize the medicine as well. It used to be that only the shaman would consume the medicine, and people didn't. What they can see from that, they can see people's energy. And then what they do at this particular facility, there were 5 shaman, there was 20 of us, and they go around and they sing what are called ikaros to you. And when they come to you, you sit up so they can feel your energetic body, and they sing these songs to you that are kind of just coming out of them. And it activates the medicine. So second night, still didn't feel anything. So even though they gave me more, so I asked for seconds, and the facilitator told me, what are you feeling? And I said, frustration. She said, where are you feeling your frustration? And I said, in my gut. And she said, we'll go back. I'm going to give you a little more. You're going to go back and focus on the frustration in your gut. And also you're always putting your intention into each ceremony. And my intention was to find peace. That was my intention. I went down at first thinking my intention was going to be to figure out the direction of my career. And they quickly led me to say, let's try something a little different here. And they helped me shift my intention to creating inner peace for myself. And so I went back, felt the frustration in my gut, and all of a sudden it was just this beautiful night. And you hear the insect in the outside, and then the ikaros, and it was such an amazing place to be, and the energy was so incredible, like I'd never experienced. And all of a sudden I felt that peace, and I thought to myself, how funny. Like, I don't even need to feel the ayahuasca. I don't need to get sick. I don't need all these things that I thought I should feel from this medicine. I'm feeling the peace, and I don't need any of that. And as soon as I became unattached from what I thought I should be feeling, holy crap, the medicine took me. And it took me, like, on the DMT experience trip for 7 hours, explosive diarrhea. I mean, 7 hours on trying to get back and forth to the toilet. And I had nothing, because you don't eat that day since breakfast. So there was nothing in me, but that's part of the process, is that purging. So that physical part of that process, something you don't really experience with other psychedelics, it's a part of the process. And what I purged on the last day, and this is sounds so gross, but they call it the Egyptian, when you're having diarrhea and vomiting at the same time. You see that?
Yeah.
The Egyptian.
Yeah.
and but what I vomited the last day was these, like, it looked like beads or like eggs, and they were black. And it was like, it really is. And I don't know how much of that I was imagining, how much of that was real. Mm-hmm. But in all of this and all the sickness and all the nights I felt very sick, a lot of it, there was something very healing about it. And there were moments throughout that I just started laughing, and it became very funny. And it was this force of being in the moment, of letting go of the control I thought I had. We all think we have over our lives, over what's going to happen to us, for us, with us, around us, letting go of that control and just being one with what is. That was the major lesson. Now, there was one night that was actually the most powerful, when I got to experience the trauma of my mother, in terms of experience my mother's trauma as if I was her. And that's the other type of trauma that I think I couldn't have ever understood or known about without this experience. And one of the shaman was singing her Icaros to me, and all of a sudden I don't even know how to describe it, but I became my mother. And I felt her trauma, and she had a very traumatic childhood. And my intention that day for that ceremony was to understand why I was self-destructive as a teenager. Why was I doing that? Because my parents got divorced, but my parents were so loving to me. They were so supportive. They did everything for us. And so why did I choose these assholes that were abusive men? Why did I go into dancing and stick with it for 4 years when I was miserable and traumatized by it? Why did I do these things? Why did I feel like I was not worthy when I had parents that told me nothing but loving words my whole life? And what that was all about was my mother's trauma that she hadn't worked through. I was carrying her trauma. When she was a child, she felt worthless. She had alcoholic parents. She was the oldest of 5, and she was taking care of her. She never got to be a kid. She never knew how to play. She wanted to grow bangs and figure out how to cut little eye holes in her hair so that she could see through, but nobody would see her. These were things that I was carrying from my mother, and I bawled and I wept and I felt it. And it was so painful and so sad. And it was something that was so clear at the same time, and something I was able to release that day, and hopefully help my mother release it as well.
Apparently, through epigenetics, we do carry the trauma of our parents. So that's a really interesting experience. Did you talk to your mother afterwards about it, and what came of that?
I did. Yes, we are very, very close. She's one of my best friends, my best friend. And she, I think in the talking to her, and I don't even know if it needed talking, but I told her all about it. And I feel like she is more open now, more ready to release it. And it's something she's talked to me about, but it was one of those things that I think I closed my heart to it, because I didn't want to connect to that pain, because it was very painful. And so I'd heard about it, but I didn't let myself connect to it. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people when it comes to animals too. It's like we protect ourselves by closing our hearts just enough to not fully feel it, because usually we don't have the tools to deal with it or aren't ready to make a change.
It's been a couple months since the experience in Peru, right?
Yes, six months.
6 months. So it's been 6 months since your experience in Peru. How are you changed? Has it done what you had wanted?
It really has. And they talk about the integration process being up to 6 months, even a year, sometimes years in the integration process. And I am still going through this process. Now, when I got back, 2 weeks into getting back, I had this great realization. I went to a workshop, and didn't want to be there. And I'm an extreme introvert. And I thought to myself when I was there, I was like, I'm kind of left early, and I was like, I wanted to come back and just be so much more relaxed and be able to be in groups and socialize. And, I kind of wanted this. I wanted a certain type of change for myself. Well, I came back and I realized that I don't need any of that. I really realized that I was okay just being me. And it was okay if I didn't want to socialize like other people socialized. And I found my peace really on my balcony with my dog and my cat. And my cat, Bob, had come into my life about 8 months earlier, ran across the road, ran right up to me. And Bob said to me, "Ella, you're my person. You're my person. I need you." And he was homeless and hungry and starving. And I said, "Bob," I didn't call him Bob yet, but I said, "If you come upstairs," I was like, "You're going to have to, I'll take you in, but you're going to have to be vegan," which I know is controversial when it comes to cats. And I literally told him that. And he told me back, "I'm fine with that." And sure enough, he literally came upstairs with me, and he made himself right at home. And he was the epitome of peace. He was loving and playful. He didn't complain once. He hardly ever meowed. He ate his vegan food, which was certified by a veterinarian, and he thrived on it. And he was he was so light. And my dog's a Chihuahua, so her and I have a lot of anxiety, both of us. We're very much alike. It was like, how can we be like Bob? That was my thing. Every day I'd be like, "Oh, I just want to be like Bob." And he was only about 3 years old. And 2 weeks after I got back, right after I found that peace in my being back at home, there was an accident, and Bob fell off the balcony in front of me and died. It was probably the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced in my life. It was right in front of me. He jumped up to kind of swatted a bug and thought he would use that opportunity to try to get up on top of the railing, which was not a railing you can get on top of. And he fell. And I saw him hit the pavement, and he survived for another 20 minutes and died in my arms. That spiraled me right back down. And let me tell you, but this time going through that grief felt so different. It was maybe the worst grief of my life. And at the same time, I let myself have it. I let myself be in it. I didn't eat my way out of it. I didn't turn to food. I didn't turn to exercise. I didn't turn to any of those old unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I say unhealthy because I would have over-exercised, anything to run or, drinking or drugs or anything like that. I just sat in it. And I cried and I cried and I cried. And I reached out to friends. And my friend Jeff Palmer, I remember this was maybe a month later, he told me on the phone, he said, "Ella, it sounds like Bob earned his ascension." And after a month of just crying, and I stopped working, I literally had nothing again. And when he said that, it was something clicked for me. And Bob really was a teacher. And he came into my life and he taught me. He taught me what peace looked like. He taught me how to be peace. And so, yeah, that turned a corner for me. Those words from Jeff Palmer of Clean Machine, and my healing really began at that moment. So, yeah, this year, when I said this year has been quite the roller coaster. So then from there, and then I talked to Dotsie. I started this new podcast. Things were kind of picking back up, but then I felt very confused. I felt so much joy and so much heartache and so much, this excitement and gratitude for this new partner I had and for this opportunity that I had. And at the same time, I felt so uncertain about what I wanted to do and what direction and what my how was. Now, what's my how? Now what? Because I felt called to get back into the animal rights scene, to really, talk about animals, to talk about cruelty. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to bring that into my voice, into the light in my world. And at the same time, I had an opportunity to go back focusing on health again with a new partner who could really help me reach the masses in a new way. And I felt confused and unsure, and I lost it. I told Dotsie, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That's how I felt. But it wasn't in the same way of like, I'm hopeless or I'm depressed. It was, well, how can I open myself up to allowing the answers to come to me? Because these things, I knew it wasn't going to come from thinking about it. And I am a determined human being who thinks, who wants to think my way out of anything.
Have you come to any more clarity in the last few months since you talked to Dotsie?
I have. And what I'm realizing is that I want to be, and I talk to Jason Robel a lot too. He's been such an amazing support system. So I went that whole route of, no, I need to talk about animals. I only want to talk about animals, to, oh, no, maybe I can do the holistic health thing. And so it's been swirling, and I realize what I love is being curious. What I love is asking questions. What I love is connecting with other extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, all as long as they're aligned with compassion. And so the direction of my career, the direction of where I'm going, is going to be around allowing me to continue asking questions and connecting and allowing and helping others connect to extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because I have a lot of expertise in a lot of different things, but that's not where my passion lies. My passion lies in learning, in getting curious, in discovering blind spots, in helping people that are maybe just on the precipice of taking a step in that direction of consciousness, of being open and ready to explore and find out things that they didn't know they didn't know. And so that's the kind of community that I am creating, in the process of creating right now. And I couldn't be more excited.
It sounds to me like Bob inspired this journey in all of that pain and agony of losing him and how you lost him. You came out bursting with a verve to speak up for him and all the billions like him, a non-human animals.
Yes, I believe that 1,000%, Bob. I don't know. I'm going to either get a Bob tattoo.
There you go.
Write a Bob book.
Good.
I've got all sorts of ideas. Be like Bob. Like, that would be a great blog, right?
There's your organization. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yes. I know. I'm wondering what you might recommend for others who are experiencing, let's call it burnout, or this feeling, that they just can't really, are not able to, and are not currently finding their jam. And you shared that experience helped you to let go of control and face trauma, two of the most visceral things that I heard you say that really connected. What is your advice for folks that want to let go of trying to control everything in their life, and they maybe want to face some trauma, but they're not going to Peru? Because something tells me that you've figured a lot about that after you've gotten home.
Yeah, I think one of the main kind of declarations that I encourage people to take on is the declaration, I approach myself and others with curiosity and compassion. And that sounds kind of simple, and we hear it in so many different ways, but that's a game changer. And it has to be, this is a reprogramming we're doing. And I think psychedelics can do a great job at kind of jumpstarting and speeding up that process. But I absolutely don't think that they're for everybody. And I don't think that they are the end all be all and necessary. Through meditation, which can start with guided meditations. Tara Brach, I think, is one of the most influential people on compassion who talk about compassion. Tara Brach, she's got an amazing podcast. I've been listening for the last 74 days every morning to a Ram Dass lecture on the Here and Now podcast. Every morning I get up, creating a magical morning routine. You know, I spent years, I would jump out of bed. I would do it the kind of Gary V, David Goggins way, jump out of bed, get right into it, start my day, go for my run, get on the computer, start at 5. I still start very early, but now I've put the emphasis, I've taken it off of doing and putting it on being and trusting that that's the path. And when we are able to take the emphasis off of what we do and place it on the value of who we are and who we are and our being, there's something very powerful that can shift in how we move through the world, how we view ourselves, our relationships with ourselves, with food, with people, with our job, being able to understand that we can be uncomfortable and we don't have to try to change that immediately. We don't have to, there's nothing wrong with us if we're not feeling positive all the freaking time.
Right.
Being
uncomfortable, just
being okay getting off of social media, doing a detox from social media. That was, I did an entire month before Peru and then a month during Peru. That was so beautiful. Just getting off. And the fear around getting off, people are going to forget me. My Instagram following is going to plummet and I'm going to have to build it back. There were so many things like, what if? Nothing changed. Nothing happened.
The world goes on.
Yeah.
The world goes on if we're not being
on.
incredibly busy and sticking ourselves into every activity.
Taking a break from busyness.
I've done it for like almost a year. And my fear was I was giving up on fighting for the animals. And I finally just realized I just don't enjoy social media. It's not serving me. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to double down in the other work that I do to save them. Like I had this deal with myself because that was where that was the only thing I was afraid of was no, it's another opportunity to speak up for the voiceless, but it just feels amazing. Like it's the best thing I've done. I don't even know what it's doing. I don't even know if I'm still alive. It's like, it's just, I don't care. And it's so free. Like there's these things in our lives and social media would be one that I think a lot of people can relate to because we all have access to it, that somehow you get in this mind space that you like need to do it. And it's insanity. Like it's crazy, right? There's no,
you
like
feel
you're still going to know what's
don't.
going on. So it's sick and diluted and twisted and not true. And if anybody wants to get off, just get off. And then if you can't get off, then you got more to dive into.
Yeah. And I think with people with personal brands and things like this, and it's so connected, that's been a challenge for me too, right? It's like, it's very, complex. It's a complex dynamic of who am I? And this is who I'm presenting. And I want to be authentic and I want to share, but is sharing what's best for the animals? So, can I be hurting the animals by sharing? But then I've got to be my authentic self, right? Like that's the right thing to do. So that's honestly why I didn't share a lot of what I'm sharing today for a long time, is because I thought, the judgment and people will not respect me. And there was all these stories and just, that's the other thing, is just understanding that everything's a story. Everything's a story. How we view ourselves, how we view the world, how other people view, they're all stories. And stories can change. And understanding that it's our energy, that's, I think, the very most important thing we can protect is our energy and just claiming and owning our power of who we are and being okay with that.
I want to go back to what we talked about earlier to find out how you're doing now. We talked about your body image issues and your disordered eating and the depression. We didn't really discuss how you were, if you ever did, emerge from the body image and the disordered eating. I think you mentioned that, and even you mentioned that the exercise addiction you didn't go back into when you had trauma with Bob, for example. But tell us how you've overcome those in the years and if ayahuasca helped you.
Yeah, so the body image and disordered eating, that I really handled many years ago. I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago. Kind of coached myself through that. I started working on self-talk and reprogramming and kind of going through a process that I then created a coaching program out of to help other women and it's helped over 100 women who have struggled with these same type of issues. It's what I specialize in my coaching as well. And so, yeah, that has not been an issue for many years. I mean, it never goes away completely, right? Like there's still moments when I'm, have feelings of, oh, I didn't exercise and this year I had some stomach issues and then with some bloating after the Peru trip. I don't know, you get off salt completely. I think I might have messed up my potassium. Anyway, there's always these moments of kind of glimpses of old habits, but I'm to the place now where I can just see those for what they are, allow them to be, recognize them, talk about them, and allow them to pass. So I think my biggest thing this year has been the depression and the burnout and navigating that depression without the use of pharmaceuticals now for just about a year. And for the first time since I was 16. Navigating that and going through the ayahuasca and then going through the Bob incident and, times when I said, maybe I give myself permission to get back on them. I thought about that a few times and then, but I'm doing really well. I feel like I've navigated my way through it, done a lot of talking with people, done a lot of meditating, a lot of sitting, a lot of exploring, a lot of allowing, and I feel really good right now. I feel really excited.
It's like you're just building, and you have built, and you continue to build the resilience.
Yeah.
Back from each scenario. Yeah. It's work. There's always work involved with anything, right? Like there's never like the slick, easy way through. I haven't found anything anyway.
No, and I mean, how boring life would be, right? If there was
it should be
I mean, this is literally how we grow. This is, I mean, it's so cliche, but these are the challenges. These are the opportunities, and getting to a place where you can see that in real time. Like, even getting to the place where you can almost be grateful as it's happening. These really challenging times, getting to that place of saying, dude, this sucks. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is going to lead to something really powerful.
What's in store for you for 2023?
Yes. So we're building a community for the curious. And that will, by the time this airs, might be out. The podcast we are launching, we had put a pause on that. It is launching as well. It's called Rise and Thrive with Ella Majors. And it's all about holistic health, healthy living. But I interview a lot of people doing amazing work in the animal rights realm, like Fiona Oakes, like you, Dotsie Bausch, and Robbie Ballinger. So many, it's all, plant-based, founded in plant-based, focused on holistic health, but at the same time sharing stories of the whole ethical side of veganism as well. So I realized I can kind of have it all. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to shy away from talking about the animals. I'm going to be loud and proud about it. If you do look at my social, I am back now. I share stories every day, both of some of the tough stuff and beautiful stories of the rescues. I'm part of Hogs and Kisses Farm Sanctuary. I'm on the founding board of that sanctuary. We are issuing micro grants this year to help other sanctuaries that are just getting started, as well as bringing in some new animals this year. So I get to be a part of that and take care of those animals. So be connected in all sorts of different ways. Yeah, I don't have to choose. I don't have to limit. There are no limits. And so here we go.
That's one of the most powerful things you said.
So I'm doing some individual coaching right now. So I am helping people. I've got a new way of doing some animal locomotives that help people with mobility and longevity. And that's just because it's fun for me. So yeah, I'm doing some individual coaching, both on the emotional health side and the fitness side. And then we're going to have a community in the podcast for people to be able to connect with other experts.
I love that you don't have to choose. That may be one of the most powerful things you've said. It's like so true, right?
Yeah.
I think so many people are like this or that, or go or stay, or this, it's just the dichotomy, the two. You don't necessarily have to choose.
No, and I think, there's this thing of, veganism, is it going to scare people away? So it's going to, alienate. So there's always complications. There's always things to consider. And ultimately what I want is best for the animals, but also what's best for me, because what's best for me will help me be my best self and be the best advocate I can be. So I got to take that into consideration. For a long time, I said, well, it's not about you, Ella. So it doesn't matter what you want. Only matters what's best for the animals. But if I'm not feeling fulfilled, if my cup isn't filled, then I can't be the best advocate for animals.
Yeah. Be in your truth. Stay in that truth. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I thank you for sharing about this journey and your past and your future and everything. I know that it will help a lot of people open their own minds about their own life and the changes that they have the power to make.
That's why I'm sharing. So I certainly hope it does.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switch4good.org. That's podcast@switch4good.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to Switch for Good. This is the future.